All right, when you think of the great Russian writers, who pops into your head? Tolstoy, right? Dostoevsky, maybe? Well, what if I told you that for Russians themselves, the undisputed number one is someone else entirely? Today, we're diving into the story of Alexander Pushkin. And trust me, this isn't just about poetry. It's a fascinating look at how a nation literally builds its heroes and then decides what to do with them.
So this is the central puzzle we're tackling. Inside Russia, if you ask who's the greatest writer, the answer is almost always, without hesitation, Pushkin. But you ask pretty much anyone in the West, and you're going to hear those other names. This gap, this paradox, it tells us so much about what it actually means to be a national writer.
You see, the West, we fell in love with the big, beefy, philosophical epics from Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. But for Russians, Pushkin is something way more fundamental. He's not just another author on the shelf. He's seen as the architect of their modern literary language. He's the source code, the guy from whom all the others flowed. And the crazy thing is, Pushkin kind of saw this coming. Towards the end of his life, he wrote these incredibly prophetic lines. He was basically calling his shot, claiming a legacy that wasn't about stone or bronze, but about words, an immortal monument that would outlive any physical thing. A beautiful thought, isn't it? A monument of words. But here's where the story gets really interesting. Russia took him literally. That monument? Oh, it was not going to stay metaphorical for long. Flash forward to 1880. A huge bronze statue of Pushkin goes up in Moscow, and it immediately becomes this cultural pilgrimage site. But the cult of Pushkin didn't stop at bronze. It completely exploded. His face started showing up everywhere, on pens, chocolate bars, even vodka bottles. You can imagine the literary purists were horrified, but this is what cemented his image into the mind of every single person.
But just as this cult of the people's poet is hitting its stride, the story takes a sharp political turn. Because in the 20th century, the image of Pushkin was about to be hijacked and redesigned for a completely different purpose by a completely different kind of power.
Just look at how Pushkin's official title gets rebranded over the decades. He starts out as the people's poet. Then the Tsar's government claims him as the national poet. Then, boom, 1937, the Soviets get a hold of him and suddenly he's a revolutionary poet. A little later, during the Cold War, he becomes the patriotic poet. His image was basically clay in the hands of whatever state was in charge. That 1937 anniversary was the real game changer. The Soviet Union, under Stalin, needed historical heroes on its side. So they took Pushkin, who was, let's be honest, a nobleman, a bit of a dandy, and often pretty conservative, and they totally transformed him into a political ancestor, a fiery opponent of the very system he was a part of. So how'd they pull off this historical makeover? Well, they used a very specific filter. To be a classic writer in the Soviet Union, you had to be deemed progressive. And that didn't just mean you were a great artist. It meant your work could be twisted and interpreted to look like you were a forerunner to Soviet ideology. Your political usefulness was way more important than your actual genius.
And this filter had huge consequences. It basically created a who's in, who's out list for Russian literature. Writers who seemed to fit the revolutionary narrative, they were promoted. But those who didn't, like Dostoevsky, whose novel The Devils was basically seen as an attack on revolutionaries, they were censored or downplayed. The past was actively being edited to serve the present.
This whole process created a kind of formula, a recipe for what a great writer was supposed to be. The critic Korney Chukovsky nailed it perfectly. Every classic writer taught in Soviet schools was sanded down to fit this perfect, flawless, and honestly pretty boring template. And my favorite rule, must have no faults or distinguishing features whatsoever. All the messiness, all the interesting contradictions that made them human, just erased.
So what happens when you turn a complex, brilliant artist into a state-sponsored, perfect icon? Well, it becomes a real double-edged sword. It created a shared culture, for sure, but it also cast a very, very long shadow.
On the one hand, you can't deny the unifying power of it. You had generations of people across this vast country all growing up learning the exact same poems by heart. It created this shared cultural vocabulary, this mental library that everyone had access to. It's a powerful thing. But on the other hand, imagine being an artist trying to create something new, living in the shadow of that official, sanitized bronze giant. It was absolutely crushing. How are you supposed to find your own voice when the state has already decided what the perfect voice sounds like? Some writers, like the revolutionary poet Vladimir Mayakovsky, just reacted with pure scorn. He looked at all the official statues and memorials and called it what he saw it as, junk. To him, it wasn't a genuine tribute to art, it was cheapening it, cluttering up history.
But other writers, like the amazing Anna Akhmatova, took a much more subversive path. She did something brilliant. She took the very idea of the monument and completely flipped it. In her poetry, she imagines her own statue, not as a symbol of state glory, but as a silent, eternal witness standing outside a political prison, with the melting snow streaming down its face like tears.
So when you step back and look at the whole picture, you realize that the story of how Pushkin became Pushkin is about something so much bigger than just one writer's career in one country.
It's really a perfect case study in a process that happens everywhere, in every culture. We need heroes. So we take them from the raw material of history, we sand off their rough edges, we curate their stories, and we put them on a pedestal to reflect not just who they were, but who we want to be.
And that kind of leaves us with one last big question. Every nation has its own statues, its own literary saints. So think about the heroes of your own culture for a second. Who are they? And more importantly, who put them there? Who decided they were the heroes? Who built your monuments?